Hey everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we're rewinding again. We did so yesterday, and we took a look at an old video that I made at the outset of Saturn square to Uranus, which is coming through its final square this month of September and next month of October. I wanted to rewind and look back at the videos that we did originally when they came out, because first of all, they're good and just in terms of refreshing on the archetypal signatures of the transit itself. But today, we're also going to take a look back at the horoscopes that we originally did. I had a guest on, Raphael from Radiant Tarot. I don't know if you guys know him and his channel. But we did horoscopes for all 12 signs on the Saturn Uranus square, which we said at the time were applicable for everyone over the course of the several years that Saturn and Uranus would be going back and forth. So you can revisit this episode today and say, hey, how has my life been affected by Saturn Uranus? Over these past couple of years, I would really say 2021 and 2, a little bit of 2020, the action was there too, but 2021 and 2, how has Saturn and Uranus been present in my life? And look back at these horoscopes and see if they have anything, any insight to offer you. Oh, but before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, share a comment, tell us your story. I'd love to hear from you guys on how Saturn Uranus has been playing out. You can always find a transcript of my daily talks on the website, nightlightastrology.com, where the new class, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, is also getting started on November 12th. Check that out. I'd love to see some of you in class. It is a great thing to study astrology over the fall and winter months. Just really go deeply into this ancient spiritual science. Of course, the early bird rate is in effect all the way up until class. You can save $500 off. But don't forget also, we do have need-based tuition. If that can help you out at all, just sign up for it now, because we tend to get a huge amount of applications and we're trying to avoid getting swept away by a ton of applications at the last minute. So we appreciate if you're going to do it, apply early for the need-based tuition if you need it. We'd be glad to help you out, make sure no one's priced out. So on that note, I hope you enjoyed these throwback horoscopes, and you can kind of, in a sense, these horoscopes are applicable for you right now, but they've also been in effect for several years, so it's good to review. All right, I hope you enjoy. Hey everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology. Today we are going to take another look at Saturn square to Uranus, and I have a special guest with me today, Raphael Rey from Radiant Tarot, and I'm going to point you to his YouTube channel and his website and stuff like that a little bit later in the show today. But Raph has been a guest, excuse me, several times before. Has come on and shared his gift as both a tarot reader and an astrologer. And it's always nice to have his take, bringing in some tarot into the forecast, whatever it may be. Today, we're going to be taking Saturn Uranus through the 12 houses according to your rising sign. And Raph will be drawing some cards to offer some commentary, and I'll be giving some astrological commentary as we go along. I'd love to see where you're all coming from in the meantime, maybe do a little bit of roll call. So I'm looking in the chat box right now, and I can see, let's see here, Northern Colorado, Phoenix, Brazil, Gettysburg, Seattle, Germany, Lakeland, Florida, Australia, Ann Arbor, the Netherlands, Idaho, Memphis, San Antonio. Yeah, awesome. I'm really glad that you're all here today, and hopefully you guys will enjoy this presentation. I'm really, really excited to have Raphael Rey here today. And I also want to point you to his website, which is radiantreality.com. If you like Raph's work today, check out his YouTube channel, which is Radiant Reality. Is that right, Raph? Do I have the name of it right?
Yeah, that's me.
Radiant Reality. And then his website is radiantreality.com. Couldn't be more excited to have him here, and you should all go check out his work, because there's a reason that I have him here doing this work with me, which is that he's awesome. So yeah, go check out his work. I hope you guys enjoy that. All right, so yesterday we took some time to break down Saturn square to Uranus, and we really did kind of an in-depth dive talking about some of the deeper philosophical implications of Saturn Uranus in the midst of Venus turning retrograde. A lot of good feedback on that video. So if you haven't watched that yet, I would recommend making sure that after today's talk, you go back and watch that. We'll be probably discussing this a little bit more in the next couple of days as the week closes out here, since it's present in the sky. So today's goal is to look at it from the standpoint of the 12 houses. Which houses are Saturn and Uranus in your birth chart based on your rising sign? And Raf is going to be with us today to discuss this from the tarot perspective alongside of my astrology interpretations. So anyway, thanks for being here, Raf. It's really nice to have you.
Likewise, it's amazing to be here. Sorry, I was just sharing the link to this on all of my socials. So that's why I was kind of deep in the moment there. It's always a pleasure to collaborate with you. I'm really happy to be here. For those of you that don't know, I took a tutor's astrology for the Modern Mystic course. It was brilliant. It really opened my eyes up to a lot of the astrology and some of the meanings behind stuff. Like, it all started to make sense and click together. So if you're planning to do the course or to take the course, absolutely sign up. Always a pleasure. And like I said, it's great to be able to see how the tarot and the astrology fit together, and how they kind of riff off of each other. It's always really, really great to see. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to put the real-time clock up and we're going to dive in. So we're going to start with Aries on the ascendant. We're just going to dive right in and see what the scoop is here. And I'm going to start by just kind of talking just briefly about where the planets are placed in the whole sign houses. So if you're an Aries rising, we're using whole sign houses. And we're looking at Saturn and Uranus across the 11th and the 2nd houses. And these two places, the 11th house is called the joy of Jupiter and the house of friends and allies. And the 2nd house was the place of income and expenditure, resources, the things that you either had to hire because you couldn't do for yourself, people that would directly aid you or assist you, or the things that you cultivated within yourself that you needed to survive. For example, things that you might grow in your garden to literally eat, or the kinds of things that you might cultivate or develop as skills or resources that maybe you could make a living through. So it's an interesting combination. If you're an Aries rising, I think a lot about this combination coming through and encouraging you to look at your resources, both social, professional, and personal, and to consider what kinds of changes need to be made. Sometimes the changes are going to be about developing a new resource, not being afraid to ask for help from other people, or finding that old groups of people or resources that are no longer working, that you have to find a way of ushering them out of your life, carefully, constructively, without burning any bridges. But also, there's times and seasons where our people or our allies in our life change because we're in need of different kind of resources within ourselves or professionally. So those are some of the major themes that I'm seeing for Aries rising right now. But Raf, what do you have with this one?
Yeah, definitely. Interestingly enough, when I looked at the minor arcana cards that would represent those degrees of the respective signs, there were two patterns that kind of emerged. So one of them would be 10 degrees of Taurus is the 5 of Pentacles, and 10 degrees of Aquarius is the 5 of Swords. So it really fits with what you're saying. And it does suggest as well that maybe, just maybe, it might be a little bit uncomfortable in how you have to kind of force some of these things out, or it may come up that there's some friction in you trying to push them forward in some way. The other combinations that we would see for this as well would be the Star card with the World, and we would also see the Hierophant card with the Fool. So in a lot of ways, there's lots of new hope in all of this, for sure. But there's kind of like this, like a difficult beginning. All right, it's almost like a birth in a sense, like when, like a woman's gone through a birth and it's been quite challenging to get her through it and the baby, but on the other side of it is this wonderful, beautiful event. But at the time, to get something started or off of its feet, it could be quite challenging. And the way that I see squares a lot of the time is they make us uncomfortable enough to make the change. It's like, I don't like this experience, I'm going to do something to push it forward. So yeah, absolutely. Would you like me to pull some specific cards for Aries?
That'd be great. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I will pull one of each. When you're ready, just say when.
All right, ready.
Okay, so first out, they have the Justice card. All right, so this is really in a lot of ways about your commitments. It's going to ask you to commit possibly to yourself as well. And sometimes that self-commitment that we have to make is to really make the difficult changes. And also, because it is the Justice card and it's ruled by Libra, this might be a time where if you want to find a way to bridge things together, you're going to have to make the commitment to be the thing or the person that brings those things together. On the other side of this, to clarify, just say when, please.
Already.
We have the Emperor. So that's really interesting because the Emperor is Aries energy. So you come up in your own reading, Aries. And this suggests as well that you have a lot more power in this situation than maybe you realize. It's probably just the fact that you're really dealing with a lot of external influences that kind of makes the whole thing feel uncomfortable. You add to that then the Justice card. There's a sense here that whatever threshold you're crossing with this transit, there isn't going to be any coming back from it. You're crossing a door for good. And if anything, I think this could be really positive for you. It's just going to take a moment for you to say, okay, these are what my needs are. This is where they balance out. And this is what I can do. And this is what I can't. It's going to be a real moment of honesty. And interestingly enough, these are direct opposites. Got Aries and Libra. So very interesting.
Yeah, I'm looking at this and going, if you're an Aries rising, the Venus retrograde energy is also in your 10th house, which is place of career and associated with authority figures. And so it really does seem like the theme of locating your sense of authority, which is always important for Aries rising folk, but needing to balance that with the cares and concerns of others, reputation, public appearance, or some process of justice in the workplace all fit really well with Venus retrograding into Pluto in your 10th house at the same time.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, it's a good match. Let's move ahead to Taurus. We're going to go somewhat quickly because otherwise I know we're going to be here all day because we can both talk. So we'll go on to Taurus. And now we're looking at this Saturn and Uranus energy. If you're a Taurus rising, moving through the 1st and 10th houses. Venus is retrograde in the 9th. I'm a Taurus rising, so this one hits close to home. But you're thinking about the responsibilities and duties, perhaps in the career house with Saturn in the 10th. And then you're thinking about the need for some kind of personal change with Uranus in the 1st, trying to change body, change character or identity, appearance, thinking about the need to be free and how that's competing with or in a pretty tense dialogue, perhaps, with Saturn in the 10th, who has more weighty set of obligations, responsibilities, duties, or commitments in the workplace. So there's a dialogue between where you're going personally right now and what Saturn's requiring of you in that career area. That's been there, since last year. This has been a dialogue that's been going back and forth. So I wonder how to balance that, because on the one hand, Uranus just says, let me just skip town, quit my job, and Saturn's like, no, that won't do, because you have a mortgage, or you have some responsibility that you have to make a living, and or there's certain obligations or expectations at your office or whatever the case may be that don't fit with your desire to wear a mohawk to work. It's that kind of, you know what I mean?
Sorry. That's so funny. Yeah.
So what do you got on this one, Raph?
Yeah, for sure. Anything that happens in the 1st house, I know it's Uranus, I know it's a big sort of heavy hitter energy, but anything that happens in the 1st house, there's always a part of me that's always kind of thought, okay, the 1st house being you have a little bit more control in this. Not a lot, because, you know, the planets are the planets, they're going to do what they do, but you kind of get to choose. But because it's Uranus, it's saying you got to choose something different. You can't choose the same thing. And Saturn in the sign of Aquarius is kind of suggesting, if it's new, I'll allow it. If it's taking you in a different direction, yeah, we can work with that. If not, you kind of get more of what you have, and it's more of the discomfort. Just say when.
Ready.
Okay. So we've got the Hierophant card, which is very Taurian energy. So again, Taurus, you show up as yourself, which is great. Establishing something new, all right? Establishing a new status quo for yourself is really the biggest energy that you could put out right now. And really asking yourself, what is the process that life is trying to initiate me through at this moment in time? Do you know what I mean? Like, I very often see this card as one of initiation. Let's add something to that. Just say when.
Ready.
Right. So we've got the Sun card. That's really, really nice, because it suggests that although the only way out is through, the rewards are absolutely worth it. And it kind of feels for me like there's a sense here, you are going to have to hold the status quo, but it has to evolve. You're being initiated in some way, shape, or form here. And it really is to make you lighter, brighter, and easier. So it's not really going to be a case of anything massive changes, but you are going to get better at combining the energies you're working through.
Nice. I love that. If I go back to the real-time clock, one thing that strikes me as important here is Venus is retrograde in the 9th house, where the sun has just entered as well. A lot of emphasis on, if we talk about the personal change, the sense of responsibility that comes with this, the need to be lighter. It's funny how sometimes, like, I think a lot about, in my own life right now, I think a lot about, you know, my life structures are very well established and in place now. Family, dad, husband, astrologer with a daily schedule. I'm committed to my vows as a yogi. So, you know, trying to find freedom within those things requires a different kind of creativity. In the past, when I was in my 20s, I'd just move, or I would, you know, I would just start up some crazy new project or whatever. Like, you know, it would be a little bit different. But finding freedom within existing commitments and establishing a new status quo, that feels really relevant, as does finding some newness within existing philosophies, guiding life principles or philosophies. With the 9th house Venus retrograde, I feel like, as a Taurus rising myself, one of the things that I've been going through has just been a reframing of a lot of the way that I do and think about my yoga practice, as well as my astrological practice, as I'm changing as a person, as I'm growing and changing. For example, something really simple is that I've had, as like a monk, had my head shaved for years, decided to grow my hair out a little bit, and I'm like trying to find some comfort in that. It seems like a small thing, but it's, for me, it's been all about trying to find spaciousness within existing commitments and shifting my philosophies slightly.
That's really awesome, and really powerful as well, quite profound. One of the things that I've pulled here, the Empress would be that Venusian energy, and the Judgment card would be the Plutonian energy. And what I see here is, it's like literally a resurrection of the pleasures in life, the simple ones, the thing, you know, bringing things back in, or finding ways to integrate them, for sure. I like that. I like that a lot. And with Mercury in that space as well, you'd have the Magician. And that kind of suggests that you're in a process of transmuting something and almost like repackaging things in a sense as well.
Yeah, you love that. So some good advice for all of those with Taurus rising out there. Let's move on to Gemini rising. Gemini rising is going to feature the Saturn Uranus dynamic across the 9th and 12th houses. These are cadent houses. They were called metacosmios by the ancient astrologers, which meant that they were a space of the gods. This was a space that prefigured creation in a sense. This is a space where things are not yet manifest, but they're taking shape. In the ninth house, it tends to be through the things we're learning or studying, the way our horizons are expanding, maybe through travel. Travel is like these weird, at least when I travel, it's like this weird portal. I come back and I'm not quite the same, and everything has shifted just because I've done a little bit of traveling. Well, I haven't done much since COVID, I guess, but then you think about the formation of beliefs and conversations with the gods, tarot, astrology, divination, all ninth house topics. Think of the 12th house, and you're thinking of a place where the influences are ultimately constructive, but in the moment they can feel a little bit more like the destructive forces in nature. The place was called the evil spirit, and the joy of Saturn was associated with anything that undermines us in ourselves, in our environment. Ultimately, of course, if we are living a reflective life, those 12th house transits are the ones that bring our attention to what's in the unconscious. And there couldn't be anything more useful than that, in a sense. So I look at this Gemini energy. If you're Gemini rising, and I look at the configuration you have, and I think right now you're becoming aware of the commitment of Saturn in the ninth. Are you able to hold that commitment or not? Is it filled with some shadows or secrets? Sometimes we hold beliefs that we don't live up to, and a 12th house to ninth house transit just says, hey, look, there's a little bit of hypocrisy in the way you're doing things. We all have that, right? Or there might be something about the way that you move through life that needs a more clearly articulated philosophy. Like you have to calibrate the GPS or the compass of your life a little bit more, because you're getting feedback that's telling you that you have part of it, but there's something that needs to be refined a little bit more. With Venus retrograde in the 8th at the same time, I think about the possibility of that refinement happening as you look at the things and people that you've gotten entangled with, the things and people that you've gotten, that you've gone in too deep with, or that maybe are not giving, that there's not enough reciprocation, and that there's feedback in relationships right now as well, telling you, part of this is because you need to refine your guidance system, if that makes sense. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing. But Raph, what do you think about this combination?
Nice. One of the things that I wrote down while you were speaking is for the Geminis, spirituality right now needs to be paramount. Whatever form that takes, however you delve into dialogue with the divine, give it more juice, because that's where you're really going to get the answers. The other thing that I put here as well is maybe learning some spiritual practice or science would be a really good way to go right now. Just say when for me.
Ready.
Okay. So Gemini, you have the 8 of Pentacles. The greatest work or apprenticeship that you can do right now is in the spiritual sector. This is the time where you've got to show up, and those houses are telling you where you need to show up. It's interesting, when you were talking about that 8th house stuff as well, there was a part of me that kind of thought, I wonder if there's a bit of Geminis losing themselves and being seen as other people.
That's
do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then the clarifying card on that is the Temperance card, right? So this really is about spirituality and alignment, and really coming into alignment with the highest work that you can do, making yourself better through spirituality so that you can really tap back into that uniqueness that you're known for.
Love it. Yeah, as I'm thinking about that, what you said about Geminis and being almost like mistaken for somebody else, I also would address with the 8th house Venus Pluto in particular. I would say sometimes we also shapeshift. I have a Mars in Gemini, so I can relate with the Gemini energy. Sometimes we shapeshift because we think it'll get a certain result, where we know it will, and yet with Venus retrograde in the 8th, it's like, well, you might want to take your real self needs to come back now, because there's some way in which you're going to get in too deep. If you don't, I would be a little bit cautious about that. If that scenario is playing out, that, if you've become really likable to your boss, but you've sacrificed doing the kind of work that's true to you somehow, that would be a time where you might want to, this process over the next couple of weeks might be one in which you try to pull back and get back to doing you a little bit better. Something like that I could see playing out as well. All right, let's go ahead and move on to, let's go to Cancer rising. So Cancer rising, we're taking this Saturn Uranus energy and we are putting it into the 8th and 11th houses. So the 8th house and the 11th house also speak to resources, just like the 11th and the 2nd did with Aries rising. So the resources in the 8th house are those that come to you through the esteem of other people, meaning the value or worth that other people say that you have. It can also be the 8th house about the things that other people are somehow in need of, that we end up being of direct service or assistance to someone else. And there's lots of entanglement in that house due to those things. It's a place of debts. It's a place of taxation and penalties that come because we owe someone else something, or we didn't do something correctly, or we neglected something that had some kind of social and sometimes financial consequence. The 8th house, however, is also a place where we deal with anxieties and fears about the future. And generally speaking, we also find the support of other people in our lives on deeper levels. So it's a complex house. The 11th house we already talked about is the joy of Jupiter, the house of good spirit, a place associated with friends and benefactors, allies. And so right now, when I see the square across these two houses, I'm especially with Uranus in the 11th, I'm thinking the idea of, like, for example, I remember when I was in junior high and there was a new group of friends that was a little bit more popular that suddenly sort of took me in. But I had kids that I sat with at the lunch table that were like, my tried and true friends. And I remember how torn I was with the desire to run with this new group of people and like, oh, it's a little bit more popular. But I'm also bound and obligated to like my friends. I can't just leave them behind and they're not being chosen by the popular crowd. And so as much as I wanted to break free and have a new kind of social experience and redefine myself socially, very Uranus in the 11th, I was beholden through loyalty to other people. And I remember, that was complicated, but because I stuck with it, I ended up being, and I think there's lots of kids like this, actually, I ended up being someone who's just able of being friends with a variety of different groups because I refused to abandon my old friends for the sake of, some new flashy group of friends. So I think a lot about loyalties right now and obligations, while at the same time, new possibilities are presenting themselves. How can you balance those kinds of things? And I think that there could also be a sense of review or revision happening in certain key relationships that make it all the more tempting to go off and try something brand new because you got Venus retrograde in your 7th house. At the same time, we could just more broadly say that it's a period of reflection upon relationships, how you're beholden to them or how people are beholden to you, changes happening in that area, while you're also trying to break through and redefine yourself in some key ways, probably in your larger social life. So anyway, those are the things I see. What do you got, Raph?
Yeah, nice. It's interesting as well. I'm just trying to think about how that would work for somebody that's an ascendant Cancerian or a moon Cancer as well. Just trying to figure it out in my head. I like that. Some of the things that I wrote down were beneficent connections that turn things on their head. So it's like maybe someone comes in and says, look, I really want to work with you, but they're a completely different personality to you.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, this could be great, but at the same time, it could not. And also spontaneous good luck that disrupts. I don't know, there was something about that really spoke to me. All right, just say when.
Ready.
Okay. So you've got the King of Pentacles. This is great, especially for career stuff. The King of Pentacles is always good for this kind of thing. In terms of a benefactor or somebody that could come in to assist you, this would be somebody that is really about what they're about. You know, the height of their game. They know what they're doing. They don't just talk the talk. They know how to walk it as well. The thing with this card, though, it can represent somebody that's quite unyielding. Like they're stuck to the way that they do things. So it might create a little bit of a clash there. And then for the second card, just say when. Ooh, the cards have spoken. You've got the Devil card. So this person is very likely to be a Capricorn. The reason I say that is because the Devil's ruled by Capricorn. And then with this card, it literally represents that. So this for me really does speak to that. Like there's a very strong-willed character that's coming in that might take you out of what's comfortable, but they could push you towards things that maybe you haven't considered as yet. It's just likely to be very disruptive.
That's interesting. That's super interesting. I love that the Devil is the Capricorn. I had to change camera views, everyone. Sorry about that. So let's see here. I'm going to put this back up and just say that the other thing to me is like I'm thinking a little bit about what could you tell me the two cards you drew again, just so I remember them really quick?
The King of Pentacles and the Devil.
Yeah. The one of the things that I'm just thinking about, because I shared this story recently. My wife is a Cancer rising. Can you see the chart again, Raph?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So this Venus Pluto is happening in her marriage house, right? She made the executive decision to transition our kids fully from co-sleeping to independent sleeping, right? As Venus was turning retrograde, because she was like, I just want our bed back. And I was like, well, thank God, first of all, because I've loved co-sleeping, but like if I would have chosen from the beginning, it would have been not like that would not have been my first choice. But I've ended up loving it. It's been a great way of like, having a family bed is really cool. There's a whole philosophy behind it that's interesting. Anyway, she's like, I want our married bed back, whatever. And last night she began this process, and the Devil card comes to my mind in terms of the screaming and wailing and process that went on with my youngest daughter the very first night. And I was like, oh yeah, she's like the Devil card and the King of Pentacles. Like my wife is having to be like this authority figure that is like, I mean, it's kind of like a drug. It's kind of like watching kids come off a drug when, I don't know. I mean, not as much, I guess, with breastfeeding, but definitely with co-sleeping, learning how to sleep on their own. Like my other daughter, when she had to learn to sleep on her own for the first time, it was the same thing for a little bit. It's kind of like they're getting off the drug of a certain sleeping arrangement, and you're having to exercise this authority. That's like, it's hard because you're helping them individuate, and it's kind of painful, but at any rate, it wasn't that bad, but it's just funny to think of the Devil card in relationship to that process.
It's funny that you mentioned like coming off of a drug, because the Devil card is addictions as well, right? It's got that sort of heavy being tied to something energy. Yeah, really interesting.
Yeah. So okay, we'll go on to the next one. I won't I could sit here and tell you guys stories all day long, but let's go to Leo rising. And Leo rising, you've got the Saturn energy in the 7th place of love and relationships, with the Uranian energy component coming into the career house. The moon is in your sign today too. Happy moon day for Leo risings. And so I think about this as, changes that when Uranus is in the 10th, I can't tell you how many times when, in 2018, when Uranus entered people's 10th houses, that I would have them being like, I've decided I'm going to study astrology, and it's like, there's that Uranian impulse to shake up the status quo around your career, your sense of calling and work in the world. And that's really strong right now, but it's in a very dynamic conversation with Saturn and Saturn's weightiness and Saturn's expectations and the necessity of Saturn around love, relationships, marriage. And so those two areas are, it's like, I also, this is just, I don't mean to sound like too stereotypical. How many times as a yoga studio owner, as someone, teaching astrology year round, with a majority of the people who consume yoga and astrology being women, that I hear from women who are like having these breakthroughs spiritually with yoga. I mean, my wife too has been seeing this. We've talked about this for years. I'm having a breakthrough, but my husband is like, not so into yoga, or my husband isn't so into astrology, or whatever the case might be. And so it's kind of like this challenging moment because you're growing, but it's also amplifying some of the differences that exist between you and someone that you love. And so I wonder about that right now, the impulse to change and how that's coming up against some recalcitrance in the marriage house, potentially. Also, there's a time where life purpose and relationships at the same time grow and change. Okay, we're relocating because of a partner's changing jobs, or we're having to reconfigure our relationship because one or both of us are taking some big steps forward in terms of our personal growth and development. So I think about a conversation happening around sense of life purpose and the sphere of commitments and relationships at the moment. What do you got, Raf?
Yeah, for sure. Similar sort of stuff, really. One of the things that I wrote down while you were speaking was there could be like a career push, but to the exclusion of everything else. And now you're having to kind of rebalance that, like where you just wanted to kind of shoot off and do something that you needed to do for yourself, you're having to bring it back. And the other thing is as well, it's like a feeling that you can't stay the same, but there's a part of you, the way that you are, that's needed by the people that know and love you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. When you're ready, just say when.
Ready.
Okay. So we got the Magician card, right? So Leo is all about that, seeking that top spot for sure, because the Magician card is always about being at the height of your game. The thing about this card, because it's ruled by Mercury, remember there are many paths to get to the way that you to where it is that you want to be. And as long as you're able to be nimble, and that's what magicians are, right? They're reality benders. So in some way, shape, or form, you're being tasked to find a way to change things, but by changing yourself. And then
nice.
for your clarifying card, you've got the Tower card. So yeah, there's no easy way to do this, right? But it does suggest that this is likely to come through an idea, some flash moment of brilliance that comes to you and says, okay, here's how I can hit all three of these birds with this one single stone. All right. So I would say that this is probably going to be a time where if you sit still, the answer to how to make all of these things happen together or simultaneously, and that's what magic is really, how you're going to bend reality is by taking a moment to let the answer come to you. You're not going to be able to force it.
For sure. That's a great one. I'm laughing because some time ago, my wife, or I used the phrase kill two birds with one stone. And my daughter got really upset. Why are we killing birds, Dad? Sorry. Why are we killing birds? And so we use this phrase now where we go, because she gets traumatized by that phrase. So we say, we're going to feed two birds with one hand.
Oh, that's brilliant. Excellent reframe as well. The family friendly version.
I know, right? Okay. So let's move on to Virgo rising. And I couldn't resist sharing that story. So if you're a Virgo rising, the Saturn Uranus energy, excuse me, I have the cold that will never end. My youngest daughter and I both, we're going on my daughter, her third week and my second. And we're like just trying to resist having to get antibiotics because it's not quite there. It's like, oh, please don't go there. But so we've got, if you're a Virgo rising, Saturn and Uranus are across your 6th and 9th house. And again, liminal spaces. The 6th is a place where sacrifice almost always comes into play. It was called the joy of Mars, and a house like Mars, it was associated with martyrdom, with people who would die for a cause, as in a soldier in an army, or people who would risk their lives for people who are injured or suffering, as in a medic on a battlefield. It's also, however, associated with the same conditions, with warfare, with sickness and disease, with accidents and injuries, and with the people who somehow end up advocating, fighting for, serving, healing, or helping others who are probably dealing with some form of misery. So Saturn in that house, along with Jupiter, maybe there's been a noble cause in your life for the past year or so. How has it changed your beliefs? How is it changing your mind? How is it shifting your paradigm, as Uranus, this god of revolution, is also in the ninth house of the higher mind? I think right now about the things that I'm willing to sacrifice for or unwilling to sacrifice for, because Saturn square Uranus could also say, is it worth it? Is all the work I've put in or all of the service that I've done, is it worth it? What is it going toward? What is it all in service of ultimately? It's fine to do nice things and to sacrifice, but if it's not a part of a clearly articulated vision of where you're going in your future, why you're doing what you're doing, maybe it's time to, reflect on that a little bit more deeply, because you could also get some burnout from this combination if you're not inspired by what you're putting a lot of energy or effort into. It could also be the kind of combination that gives you those rapid insights when it comes to your own health or disease, or a better way of doing work to save more time or energy or something like that. So those are some things that come to my mind. What do you think, Raph?
Yeah, all really awesome. The three things that I have is hold back from giving everything up front when it comes to work. If you go straight in at 100, there's nothing else to give. The second was consider what's happening before you go rushing in. So if you're called upon for something, it might be an idea to check what you're being asked to kind of give to or to do. And then prioritize your spiritual health in order to enhance the physical health. That kind of feels like a message. Right. Just say when.
Ready.
Okay, so they have the Ten of Pentacles. I love this card because it's got so many different meanings. But one of the things that I often remind people, the truest home that we're ever going to have is this. This physical body that we're given is the first home that we're at, well, second, technically, mother's womb, etc. So this is asking you to really come back to being comfortable in that space. And it's also a reminder that your abundance is here. Like, it's literally in the here and now. It may even be as well that you have too much that you're not able to use at the moment. So this would be a time to really consider that. And then your second card.
Ready.
Ooh, you have the Empress. That's really, really nice. I mean, this doesn't really speak so much to the astrology for me. I would say this is about movement. This is about a new home. This is about new finance, new money coming in. With the Empress as well, it's about seeing the beauty in the mundane, because that Ten of Pentacles is very grounded. It's kind of here and now. And with the Empress, it just kind of reminds you to enjoy the things that are here and now. And one of them being your physical body.
One thing that comes to mind is that the Venus is retrograding in your, if you are a Virgo rising, it's retrograding in your fifth house, which is the place of pleasure. And Venus retrograde in the fifth will often be about refining what makes us happier, what brings us joy creatively, sexually, artistically. So that energy was like, hey, don't forget me right now. I'm important.
Yeah.
That's funny. So let's go on to Libra rising. Libra rising, we have the Saturn Uranus dynamic playing across your fifth and eighth house axis. There we go. There's the joy of Venus with Saturn in the fifth. And Saturn in the fifth, I'll tell you, Saturn in the fifth house sometimes is a sign that we are sacrificing our pleasure somehow. Saturn is not a planet that is necessarily concerned. Saturn in Aquarius is more like, give me a book on the I Ching or astrology or human design, or like, let me study some vast system of starry knowledge. And maybe that brings a lot of joy and happiness, or maybe there's something creative around that kind of broad-minded Aquarian, spiritual science energy. But the fifth house Saturn in general can also, like, I just go, go bowling and make out with your girlfriend. It's or like, go throw the ball with your dog out in the yard. It's like just very basic. Like, are you taking care of like all of the right chemicals like serotonin, oxytocin? Like, are you having fun? Are you enjoying things? Have you had a good meal with friends lately? Have you laughed? Have you watched a movie you like? Have you had sex? Whatever the case might be, are you addressing joy and pleasure? Saturn in Aquarius might be taking things a little bit too seriously. Uranus in the eighth and Taurus in Venus's sign might be asking Saturn to loosen up somehow. Or I would pay, if I were Libra rising, I would pay close attention to the people in your life who are inviting you to open up and explore pleasure and fun a little bit more. I actually, someone that I know personally, Libra rising, who's been invited to go home to meet who they're dating, to meet their family over the holidays, terrified.
Nice.
Like, oh, no, I can't do it. And I'm like, it could be fun. That's the thing that I said to her. I was like, it could be fun. It could be, you could have a really good time, and it could, break open there. She's like, well, we have a pattern going, and I'm comfortable with it. And that's Saturn in the fifth being like, there's sanctions for my fun. And Uranus in the eighth is like, now come on, let's take some risks, and let's let some of that earthy, sensual Taurian energy have more free expression. Those are some of the things that I'm thinking about right now for Libra rising. But Venus retrograde in the fourth, issues around home and family and roots. So in her case, it's also bringing up insecurity about belonging around home and family. So some interesting energies there. What do you think, Raph?
Yeah, for sure. The only thing that I wrote down was get serious about having fun. And I think you encapsulated that really well with the, fun has to be sanctioned. That was hilarious. Yeah, all right. When you're ready, just say when.
Ready.
Okay, so we've got the Nine of Swords. And it kind of figures, right? Especially with the energy that you just talked about. This card very often says to you, one, get out of your head. And two, you're hyping it up to worse than it's likely to be. All right. So literally, if you're a Libra rising, get out of there. All right. Like the way that you're seeing it, it's, I think this was in one of your classes, you talked about the shadow on the wall. And it always reminds, like in my head, I kind of saw this as like this big scary shadow and this big sound, and then a chihuahua comes around the corner, right? It could be like that. Mm-hmm. All right. So for your second card, you've got the moon card. Interestingly enough, this is not an easy combination of cards because it actually speaks to depression. The Nine of Swords with the moon card can be quite heavy. The beauty of this is if you allow yourself to see what the fear is, you'll absolutely be able to get past it. The other thing with the moon card here, you're being asked to observe where what you're experiencing now is coming from the past. That's what the moon card is, because it's reflective, right? It's not necessarily a true reflection of what actually is.
Nice.
Sorry, I don't have anything brighter for the Librans.
No, when I think about that combination right now, with Libra and the eighth house Uranus, I think about, the eighth house is a place of fears and anxieties. And here's Uranus, the planet of breakthroughs. And I think you've got it right. It just face the fear, face the sense of something haunting you from the past, even. And if you face it and move through it, you'll find out it's probably not nearly as bad as you think it is. Or there's the potential to work through fears and anxieties or worries about how you think something will go versus the lightness with which something may actually be experienced if you just go do it. That comes to mind for me majorly with that one. Let's go on to Scorpio rising. With Scorpio rising, we're taking now Saturn and putting it into the fourth house, Uranus into the 11th. I'm talking now about the combination between the fourth house, home, family, property, land, parents, roots, the foundation of your life, usually the kind of private sphere of life. And then you're talking about Uranus trying to create its changes and its excitement, its need for greater freedom and exploration around the marriage house, but to also broadly speaking be the house of sexuality, love, partnerships. So I think about patterns that have existed in your family relative to love, marriage, intimacy. How were those things modeled for you as you grew up? What kinds of changes are you experiencing right now in relationships or opportunities, or what kind of excitement? And how is it hitting up against Saturn in the fourth that says, well, it has to go the way that it went in the past. That Saturn will sort of insist upon that in the fourth house sometimes. And maybe there's things to draw on from the past that can provide some containment and grounding for Uranus. For example, if you're like, if you're in a phase where you're just, you're having fun, but nothing too serious is happening, and you're starting to get frustrated with it, which can also happen with Uranus in the seventh, then Saturn might pull it back and say, well, actually, I need some commitment. On the other hand, if Saturn's being too conservative, then Uranus can pull and say, why don't you just have some fun and experiment and try something new? But I think that the conversation is definitely between the area of life that has to do with establishing a sense of security, home, family, how you were raised, your childhood, and this Uranian impulse in the seventh house of love and relationships. So that's what I've got. What about you, Raph?
Yeah, nice. I put family clashes with love. So maybe the family don't necessarily like the partner or resonate with them. Could be possible. And also there was something about the traditions of the family, like you were saying, but they really encroach on this. And it's like, no, we have our relationship away from your family. We can't almost like allow them to push it or guide it to be what what they think it should. When you're ready, just say when.
Ready.
So we've got the Eight of Pentacles again. So in a lot of ways, this card really asks you to get serious about the relationship work that you're doing, all right? To really show up for it. What is it that you're putting into the relationship? First of all you can ever really be accountable for is your part in it. And as long as you're giving your part of it, that really puts you in line for then being able to ask for more from the other side. And then to clarify on that, got the Chariot card, right? So break out of the box is what I want to say to you here. Go and see different spaces, or if you're going to do this whole family thing, try to do it on some sort of neutral ground or territory. That's how you're going to win this, right? The Chariot card is victory and success, but it's asking you to go in a very different direction. And with that Eight of Pentacles, you might have to get creative about the ways that you do this, or certainly the time periods that you do it over.
Nice. For the sake of time, we're going to keep moving along here. We're going to put Sag on the ascendant, and we're looking at Saturn and Uranus across the third and the sixth house. I would look at this and say that there is either a new way of solving problems, because the third house, sixth house, with the sixth house tending to be a place of conflict and challenge or sacrifice, and the third house being a place, especially with Saturn and an air sign in it, that can be very mental and intellectual, or literally about how you process information. I would look at this and say that there's either the opportunity to adopt a new strategy for a new way of solving problems, or a recurring problem and a new idea about how to address it. There's also the ability to change your mind this month, to literally change the way that you think. I would be careful with Mars in your first house, if you're a Sag right now, of getting too headstrong and overly confident and unbending and sort of rigid about the way you're thinking or wanting to do something. I would be specifically thinking about that around money or business, with Venus retrograding in your second house. But I think that combination to me says there is a new idea, there's a new way of doing something, there's exciting new principles that can be applied, or a new skill or technique or something. It might make life easier. But it's going to take a little bit to implement. Don't be impatient. Let this new way of thinking or processing, or new technology or media or something like that, and the effect that you're hoping it'll have, especially around business, money, and things like that, let it, give it like a month or two, and be very patient with the process. Because if you try to ram things forward right now, my sense is that there's something unbending about this that could lead to something breaking. What do you think, Raf?
I feel that. Yeah, interestingly enough, as well, with that Uranus in the sixth, I kind of get this feeling that maybe something is too novel or too new for what you're trying to do, and it doesn't quite sort of fit. Kind of like wearing all green and then having like red shoes and socks or something. When you're ready, just say when.
Ready.
So we've got the strength card. Nice, right? Have the courage to stay the course, I think is what I really want to say to you. And if that means that things are extended or they take longer, then let them take longer. If it means you have to take some bits out or put some bits in, be okay with that. The other thing with the strength card as well, this is about you being seen as you truly are. So, really have the courage to do so. And your clarifying card is the faith card in this deck, but it's actually the Hierophant. I almost want to, like, the words that I'm hearing in my mind is, do you remember that song, like, it's hip to be square? Like, there's something about this that's kind of saying to me, like, how, like, even if you have to not dumb it down or, not to become square or to take the edge off, but find a way to let it fit with more people than just who you think it's for. Because I kind of feel like whatever you're doing, it might be for more people than you think it is. And there's something about the way that you're doing it that is excluding some of the people that could really benefit from it.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
The
That's
best
really
way
nice
I can explain it.
Nice read. Let's go to Capricorn on the ascendant, which is going to place Saturn in your second and Uranus in your fifth, with Venus retrograding in your first. Venus retrograde in your first is probably the biggest story right now, actually, because there's not there, with Pluto, it's a pretty deep look at yourself. It's like, they say that there's that saying, and I encountered this firsthand one time during an ayahuasca ceremony. I went and used the bathroom. I was able to walk enough to find the bathroom, but I made the mistake of looking in the mirror.
So,
like, never, if you're ever on a psychedelic, like, don't look in a mirror. Like, because it's really crazy, the way but this is kind of like that. It's a little bit like being on acid and looking in a mirror with Venus and Pluto conjoining in your first house. You're either looking in it and you don't know you are right now, and maybe through the process, something's going to be reflected back to you, and you can see something that's below the surface. Maybe it's something promising that needs to come out more, that is just tucked in there due to a lack of confidence. Maybe it's something that's a shadow that you're not seeing. With some kind of self-inventory and the ability to see things in yourself that you haven't before, care, concern for your health, your body, your identity. That to me seems primary for Capricorns right now. But also there's questions about, with Saturn in the second, place of resources, money, squaring Uranus in the fifth, a place of creativity, the need for joy and fun. I wonder about, for example, this would be the perfect setup for someone who is going through, for example, like someone who might need to go to rehab, who says, I'm seeing something about myself and I need to go to rehab. But if I go to rehab, maybe I'll temporarily be out of a job. So I could see there being like really challenging choices that have to be made with the allocation of your time, your money, your energy, your resources, and considering what is the best version of myself and how do I utilize what I have in service of that better version of myself that I'm trying to create right now. It's like, it's tricky when we want to change, but we're also bound or obligated by things, which I think Saturn in the second might be saying right now. Another thing that comes to my mind is some shift of resources for the sake of having more creative fulfillment. The Venus in the first house can say, you know what, I'm not really happy with the way I'm doing things. There's not enough of the goddess in my life giving me a sense of creative fulfillment. Remember, the fifth house in your chart is ruled by Venus and was called the joy of Venus. With Uranus right there squaring Saturn in the second, I could see Capricorn's asking the question, like, am I creatively fulfilled? For example, I have a friend who's a Cap rising. works for an animation studio. And I know that at times it's like, well, am I doing my creative work, or, am I drawing the next, blockbuster movie? And it really has not, I'm inserting Snickers bars throughout it. You know what I mean? Like, what am I doing? Is it making me happy? Those seem like some key questions for Caps right now. What about you,
Yeah,
Raph?
that, I think Saturn in the second as well. I always find this, and not just from a financial perspective, but very often, like, I don't know why, I just kind of feel like it's not enough. Like, whatever I'm getting, I don't feel like I'm getting the full juice out of it. Do you know what I mean? Like, some things can feel a bit hollow. When you're ready, just say when.
Ready.
So they have the Magician as well, right? So this is an interesting one because obviously this card can be the trickster energy as well. And it can also be where sometimes we're holding on too tightly to a specific version of ourselves. And so, that really feels quite relevant for me. I think the other thing here as well is your thoughts of what is and the way that you'd like to take things aren't necessarily aligning. All right, so there's a mismatch in the energy somewhere. And to clarify on that,
Ready.
you've got the World card. All right, nice. So honestly, I think the best thing, lockdowns aside, if you're a Cap rising or a Capricorn, this might be a really good time to get out of Dodge so that you can get out of your head. All right, this would be a really good time to break those bonds in some way. And also, the World card speaks to communities. So this is the thing that I really want to say to Caps: go where you're not in charge. Go somewhere where you're not expected to be who you're known to be, if that makes sense. So that you're kind of leveling the playing field in some way.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. That's a great one. Let's move to Aquarius rising. And when it's Aquarius rising, when Aquarius is rising, we're taking Saturn, replacing it in the first house with Uranus in the fourth, Venus retrograding in the 12th. I would think a lot about, for Aquarians, what am I personally responsible for? And part of that is also shifting it away from other people, and thinking, because eventually I think about this combination of Saturn in the first and Venus in the 12th, is that if I'm overly concerned with who and what I'm responsible for in terms of others or family members, I might betray myself in some key ways, or I might end up betraying others, because we end up doing that when we put others first to the extent that we neglect ourselves, then eventually we have to betray them to get back to ourselves. This is a weird dynamic that can play out like that. So I would think about really looking at what are my needs, because you're an Aquarius, you've got Saturn in the first, but Venus retrograding in your 12th. What's in the shadow right now that represents a desire that's unfulfilled or that's not being met in the right way? And it ultimately probably comes back to you and whether you're taking care of yourself enough. Saturn in the first can be very dutiful, very duty bound, very a sense of obligation can be very strong. Also, the need to change personally, as you're also meeting that you're seeing lots of changes around home, family, and roots. So Uranus in the fourth, there's a lot of disruption around home, family, the living environment, maybe dating back to 2018 when Uranus entered the fourth house in your chart, if you're an Aquarius rising. But then you're looking at that square with Saturn in the first and saying, what's constant within me that I can draw on as a resource, maybe despite the changes happening around the roots. And then also just thinking to myself, if I'm an Aquarius rising, if I am really true to myself, it is possible that it will cause some disruptions for other people in my life. And that's okay. What do you think, Raph?
Yeah, so, sorry, I was really listening to that because obviously I'm an Aquarius sun, and I think even though it's only for my sun sign, that's pretty spot on with how I feel at the moment with the familial stuff that's going on for me.
Right.
And yeah, it really, like, that really, really spoke to me. And It's funny because in the beginning I kind of smirked because I thought, yeah, at any point you're just going to see all the Aquarians like, that's it, I'm gone. You know, they just chuck everything in the air and run. You can't, right? Unfortunately, you're going to have to stick it out. And if I'm completely honest with you, I feel like once Saturn moves into Pisces, that will be the moment at which the goodies come. But I don't think it will be before then. You've got a bit more to do. All right, just say when. Ooh, okay, and the cards have spoken, and you'll never believe what it is. The first card that's looking at me is the star card.
Oh, nice.
So Aquarius,
Very
right?
Aquarian.
You show up as yourself, but also there's a reminder that whatever you're facing or going through at this moment in time, that the star card is basically saying the seeds of, like, you know, they say like the seeds of something is in it, seeds of destruction are in something that's, there's a saying like that. This feels like, to me, it's like the seeds of the hope for your future are literally here, and they're being sown with every challenging day or obstacle that you're getting past. So stay the course. Again, like, this is the moment to really trust yourself and the universe, and also trust that you've got it, right? That you've got what you need. And then to clarify on that, you have the Wheel of Fortune. I would say if you're an Aquarius, again, travel comes up, and long distance travel at that. If you're bound to deal with the family stuff for at least another year plus, I would put some long distance or bucket list trip into 2022 for yourself to alleviate that itchy foot syndrome. Nice.
So last but not least, we will put Pisces on the ascendant, which takes Saturn into the 12th and Uranus into the 3rd. I think about, for Pisceans, I think about a major personal breakthrough on the horizon, because Jupiter's about to enter your first at the end of this month. It's going to conjoin with Neptune and an exalted Venus at the end of April. I think of the Saturn-Uranus dynamic as indicative of the closing of a long period for you. If you're a Pisces, that'll probably, maybe finally conclude by the fall of 2022, when Saturn and Uranus come back within a degree for one last time. But this, to me, is about working your way out of certain kinds of constraints. I would think of them probably social in nature or professional, because of the heavy emphasis on that Pluto and Saturn have had over the past few years in the 11th house, now Saturn in the 12th. To me, this strikes me as the moment where the epiphany or the realization or the sense of knowing what you have to do to break out of something that feels like it's holding you back. Maybe it's something just inside of yourself, maybe it's something in the environment, but that courage or that insight, that moment of breakthrough or revelation, I think is really close at hand for Pisces risings. And again, that's because you're seeing this in the 12th and the 3rd, a place that can have a lot to do with mental traps and the need to break free from strictures. Jupiter pushing into the first, conjoining Neptune, feels like a lot of uplifting, freeing energy is coming for Piscean, for Pisces, my Pisces rising folk, pretty soon. So that's what I've got. Raph, what about you?
Nice. I kind of feel that as well. I know a Pisces rising, actually, and literally, like, in my head, I could see him like, yeah, breaking out of jail. And it's that self-imposed jail as well, not like a literal one. All right, when you're ready, just say when.
Ready.
So Pisces, you have the Queen of Wands. It is time to set your boundaries, right? This is the time for you to speak up. It's the time for you to clearly define not only yourself, but also your personal space, whether this is in your financial sphere, your professional sphere. It's time for you to really stand up and be counted in a lot of ways, I think. Now, the Queen of Wands could also represent a fire sign woman, Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, that might be a key in this component. And your clarifying energy is the Hermit card. right? So self-reliance is what these two say to me. This is a time to really get into that moment of clearly defining. And if it means having to pull yourself out of or away from someone or something or some tie, be prepared to do it. And, you know, if that means spending some time alone, so be it. You know, sometimes if we pull ourselves out of something that is constrictive, you know, with the Hermit card, we discover some sort of personal wisdom. And, you know, if it means being alone for a little while, it means that whatever comes in will be of quality.
That's great advice. Yeah, totally. I am so thankful for you being here today. We've worked our way through all 12 signs. We had to keep the pace up a little bit because I have a client in 10 minutes. So you know, it's like, it's easy for me. And that's my fault because I get going on stories and then, you know, off we are on tangents for 20 minutes. So,
They're great.
but I really appreciate you being here and just sharing your wisdom and sharing what you know about the cards and your astrological insight combined. It's really fun to tag team. I want to point people to your website. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. And here is Radiant Reality. If you like Raf's work, go check out his services, his YouTube channel, which is also Radiant Reality on YouTube. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Yep. And you'd be doing a version of this video, taking it and throwing an intro on it. I think posting it on your channel as well. So definitely go and check out Raf's work. We'd like to collaborate together. So, you know, as you guys have seen over the past couple of months, we've done this a few times. We'll hopefully do it more. I find that it's really nice to have a partner in reading in this manner because you can come up with a lot of insights, but it's nice to have someone whose associative network is firing at the same time as your own and bringing in other things too. So it's a real privilege and it's been fun to have you.
Guys, thank you so much. Acyuta is always a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah. Thanks so much, everybody. I hope you guys have a good one and we will see you all tomorrow.